Bill 951 basically would impose a prohibition on hydraulic fracturing to obtain natural gas in the eastern groundwater management area. That's a administratively defined area, which is basically everything east of Interstate 95. It was established by DEQ for purposes of a groundwater regulation. Just a little bit of background. Right now, there's about 84,000 acres of land that's leased in the Northern Neck and the Middle Peninsula by a Texas-based group looking to do fracking. In response to that, several counties have taken action to regulate and prohibit fracking in the Northern Neck and Middle Peninsula already, including King George, Westmoreland, King George, Westmoreland, and Richmond County. Essex County adopted comprehensive plan language to basically make it very difficult to do already. The problem is one leak of this stuff, this fracking chemicals or whatever, will spoil the Rappahannock River forever. The Rappahannock River is the longest free-flowing river in Virginia. It's not the longest river in Virginia, but it's the longest free-flowing river in Virginia. Localities have already started to take action on this, and I believe that we ought to prohibit it across the entire eastern groundwater management area. That's what the bill does, and I'm happy to take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any questions of Senator Surovell?
Yeah, I got a couple questions.
Senator Peterson.
Have there been any existing incidents where fracking has contaminated a water supply or led to some physical or property damage?
In the United States, yes. There's been explosions. There's been contaminated
How about
ground
in
wells.
Commonwealth of Virginia, since our laws affect the Commonwealth of Virginia?
Well, the Commonwealth of Virginia, this new method of fracking has never been used. They use a different method in Southwest Virginia, but I believe the method that they're talking about using in the Taylorsville Basin has never been used in Virginia. It's been used in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and some other places. And Senator from Southwest, Senator Chafin could probably answer what goes on in Southwest better than I do, but they've been doing it there since the 80s, but again, I think it's a different method down there.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Chafin.
we've been doing it out there since 1950s.
50s, okay.
And so, and have a long history of no contamination of water. And I might remind this board that, this august group that there is an agency that is charged with regulating the entire scheme of oil and gas exploration, and that agency has the ability to regulate any of these things. Let me ask, if I may.
Do you have a question?
I do have a question.
Senator Chafin.
Senator Surovell, now, are you aware that there are people in the is it Taylorsville Basin? Are you aware that that several of them have leases and have given leases on their properties?
Yes, I said that a minute ago, and that's also, I think, what prompted the 4 localities that took action to prohibit it from happening in their counties.
Yes, sir. And further question, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Chafin.
Are you aware that they are gainfully paid? They're paid monetary consideration for those leases?
I would assume they did.
Mr. Chairman, would further
Senator
question. Could the senator tell me his thoughts on if the Commonwealth takes away those rights of those individuals, those property rights, would that not be a taking without due consideration to those individuals for which this Commonwealth could very well find itself sued and liable for?
Well, what I would say to the senator is a couple things. Number one, I've never litigated a takings case, but I've certainly made myself familiar with takings law as the different cases have come down. We had to deal with a big constitutional amendment a couple of years ago, which involved the Kelo case and a lot of that, and they teach us all this in law school. But with regard to whether this is a taking, I would submit that if this is a taking, then the uranium ban that's been on our books for a long time is a taking, which I think that was done in response to somebody either getting a lease or coming very close to getting a lease. We also regulate lots of other property rights in the state that aren't a taking. If you look at the cases that I think that it would be analyzed under, just Penn Central and Lucas, those are the last 2 major U.S. Supreme Court cases dealing with it. Lucas had to deal with a guy who bought a beachfront lot in South Carolina, and the South Carolina Coastal Management Commission adopted rules which basically said he couldn't build a house after he bought the lot for $1 million. And the U.S. Supreme Court said that if you completely devalue a lot, that's a taking. But if you only partially devalue it, it is not a taking, which is what this would be. And Penn Central was the 1978 case where there was the Penn Central Railroad Station, where the city of New York prohibited them from building 20 stories on top of an existing railroad station. U.S. Supreme Court said, you can keep using your property, you keep having a railroad station there, you keep doing other things on it, unless you take away most of your property rights or all of your property rights. That's when the Constitution kicks in, but not when they take away one or two or three of the bundle of sticks that we normally talk about in law school about your various property rights. And so I also, if you'd like to read it, have a 97-page law review article, University of Cincinnati, which says that fracking bans are not takings because in New York they banned fracking in 2014 and nobody there has found it to be a taking yet. So I would submit that we're in pretty safe legal territory.
Mr. Chairman, further
Senator
question.
Chafin.
Yes, sir. You mentioned the uranium industry, but isn't it true that that industry did not have any leases out there for which monetary consideration had already exchanged hands?
I don't know the answer to that. I was probably about 4 years old or 10 years old or something when that went down, but my understanding was the uranium ban.
Senator Sorovell, I want
You might be able to answer me on
weigh
that.
in here real quickly. In a little bit to address Senator Chafin's question, because he does raise a good concern. The problem is I think those leases were granted without any proper zoning authority to do the activity. And so I'm not sure that they had a vested interest in those leases to start with because they didn't know whether or not they were going to get the zoning authority to do the activity. Certainly in the area he's talking about, I know it's covered out in your part of the state. So that may address that question.
Mr. Chairman, further question.
Senator Chafin.
Are you aware that there is an acreage affected of about 84,000 acres?
That's what I said earlier, although there was a lot of noise in the room, you might not have heard me.
I didn't hear you, Mr. Chairman. Further question.
Senator Chafin.
And are you also aware that the amount of money compensation should it become unlawful to frack that area could be in the hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars?
I have no idea, and I have no idea how that would work. As I said, I don't think that it's a taking under my evaluation of the law, but I'm not I've never litigated a takings case in my life, but I would also say that if the possibility, or if this gas that were there were so valuable, it's not clear to me why there has been zero activity or action on these leases in the last 2 or 3 years. I think they got the leases, I want to say, 3 years ago, and I think they did 1 or 2 wells, and there's been zero activity for like the last 2 years. I think it's my understanding.
All right, Senator Chafin, that help you? I
Mr. Chairman, I don't
think
think
it's going to help
anything
you
will help
vote the
me with
bill,
this
but
bill.
vote for the bill. But does that answer your question? Maybe I should say. Any other members have questions
Yep.
for the patron?
Mr. Chair,
Senator Peters.
and I think Senator Chafin got to the points I was going to ask, but I know a little bit about oil and gas leasing. You have property rights, and you have what are called mineral rights,
Right.
which are actually the subsurface rights to the extraction rights.
Right.
And where you have an oil and gas lease, that basically is you give somebody effectively an easement, a right-of-way, where they can drill on that land and extract whatever they find. I guess my question is, where you already have an existing lease, it's been negotiated, theoretically a fee's been paid to do it, and then you pass a law saying, oh, by the way, you can't use hydraulic fracking, which is, to the best of my knowledge, the only way you can bring out natural gas, at least in this part of the world. How can that not be a taking?
Because the vested rights doctrine that I'm aware of doesn't kick in until the government is granted a right. And until the government's granted that license to that right, I don't think there's anything if the government takes away something that's never granted, I don't think that becomes a taking. Right now you currently have the ability to, everybody, I think, well, not everybody, every property, a lot of people drill a well. And DEQ just imposed some significant well drilling restrictions in the Eastern Groundwater Management area. Senator Stewart's very aware of it because all of his constituents fall within it, as do most of mine, if not all. And we regulate subsurface rights all the time, limit them, prohibit them in a lot of different ways. And if you're familiar with takings theory, I can send you the law review article. There's lots of different ways that it's evaluated and has been justified by the courts over the years. And so just because somebody made a contract, they never got government approval for it, they just got a contract and maybe potentially do something in the future, doesn't convert it into some property right that they can sue the government for.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Black.
Question, does the Eastern Virginia groundwater management area encompass southwestern Virginia?
No. And by the way, I have a line amendment to that
It's,
point.
Senator Black, just for your information, it's pretty much east of
95.
95.
I have a-
That's not exactly, but that's
Mr. Chairman, I have a
pretty
line
close.
amendment I forgot to offer to that to just make clear.
You want to report that line amendment?
Sure. You have it? Yeah.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, on line 12, it's just one line amendment. After the words fracturing in, add the words any locality located in. So it reads, no person shall conduct any hydraulic fracturing in any locality located in the Eastern Virginia groundwater management
Is there a
area.
motion on that amendment? Second, motion properly seconded to amend as reported. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Mr. Chair,
Senator Peterson.
and let me just, I'm going to say a quasi-friendly amendment. We had the issue of mine voids about 5 or 6 years ago, where we passed laws that the Supreme Court specifically found did not impact the rights of people that had already had leases in the mine voids. Would you be willing to have an amendment on your bill that said it specifically would not affect current private property rights?
No. Not
Okay.
that, not that. I don't, because that, I think, defeats the primary point of the bill.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Brian Hoffman, Programs Manager with Friends of the Rappahannock, based in Fredericksburg and operations and offices throughout the Northern Neck and Middle Peninsula. With several colleagues and other partner organizations in this room today, we've been working on this issue with our localities for the last 5 years. We've had extensive sessions and meetings with planning commissions and board of supervisors in all of the counties that currently hold leases. That's in the Northern Neck, King George County, Westmoreland County, Essex County, Caroline County, King and Queen County. As the senator mentioned, we've had local ordinance language adopted that drastically restricts the ability for any fracking natural gas operations in King George County and most recently Westmoreland County. Richmond County, adjacent to Westmoreland County, enacted a ban on hydraulic fracturing activities within their county, and Essex County has taken the steps to amend their comprehensive plan to further address local protections against any potential impacts from natural gas and fracking particularly. Now, there has been ample opportunity for the community members and the leaseholders individually to come and speak at these planning commission sessions and the board of supervisors. And we have 84,000 acres. That was the number presented by both Senator Chafin and Senator Surovell. Those local ordinances restrict the areas in which those activities can happen to the point where there's only about 9% of the county left in King George that's eligible for those. So this would further provide protections to all those counties impacted, which was what those localities decided for themselves. And we're very interested in support of this bill to protect the natural resources of the Rappahannock River, which provides millions and millions of dollars in seafood, which could be impacted by any sort of spill. The Potomac Aquifer, which would have to be drilled through with this process, provides drinking water to several million people. To the point where these activities and the Rappahannock River was listed as number 5 most endangered river in the United States by one of our partners, American Rivers. We don't want to see this happen. It's a threat to our rural economy with our seafood industry, the rural nature of these communities, and the localities' actions on that speak for themselves. Thank you
like
very
this
much.
bill?
I do like this bill.
Thank you. You got more folks behind you who'd like to say something.
It's Linda Muller. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I'm from Stafford County. I'm also the fracking co-chair, issues co-chair for the Virginia Chapter Sierra Club, and I'm here in support of Senate Bill 951. And for some of you who may not be aware that the Eastern Virginia groundwater management area starts as far north as Fairfax County and runs along Virginia's eastern border all the way down to Virginia Beach. It's an enormous management area, but the primary area that's being proposed for fracking is in the Taylorsville Basin, which includes the counties that have been mentioned already by Mr. Surovell. I need to point out, though, that the Eastern Virginia Groundwater Management Advisory Committee issued their final report just last year. And the report is eye-opening with some of the statements. And I'd like to provide just briefly a couple of those statements in the report that was provided to the Department of Environmental Quality and the Virginia General Assembly. Quote, the Virginia Potomac Aquifer is facing significant sustainable challenges. Quote, available groundwater supplies in the Eastern Virginia Groundwater Management Area are insufficient to meet long-term demands of current and future groundwater users. And these groundwater resources are critical to the health, welfare, and the economic prosperity of Eastern Virginia. Now, hydraulic fracturing is a heavy industrial process that utilizes enormous quantities of water, anywhere between 1 to 8
Ms.
million
Muller.
Gallons.
Ms. Muller?
Yes.
I just wanted, we know you like
Okay,
this bill.
all right, so.
You got a lot of folks who'd
All
like
right,
to speak as
so
well. if you don't
my
mind.
last sentence. What we didn't recognize then, because a lot of people have leases before the 2017.
You're almost out of time and others want to
We
talk.
understand now, and so in order to protect our groundwater resources, please support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Please come up. And just remember other folks want to speak too.
Mr. Chairman, Mike Town, Virginia LCV, we support the bill.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Harrison Wallace, CCAN and Chesapeake Action Network Action Fund, and we support this.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senators, my name is Pat Calvert, Virginia Conservation Network. We are full support of SB 951.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Peggy Sanner, Chesapeake Bay Foundation, we support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there those that have a different perspective on this?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, David Clark, representing the Virginia Oil and Gas Association. The members of VOGA include those who are actively producing natural gas in the Commonwealth of Virginia, primarily or almost exclusively now in Southwest Virginia. We do oppose Senate Bill 951 as an anti-business measure and one with an unwarranted encroachment on property rights. To be clear, I think as perhaps Senator Peterson was suggesting, a ban on fracking in Eastern Virginia is a ban on producing natural gas in Eastern Virginia. You will not produce gas in Eastern Virginia today without fracking. With this bill, landowners in Eastern Virginia will be deprived of the right to produce their natural gas. And not only will they be deprived of their rights to receive lease payments, but also to receive royalty payments if and when gas was ever produced in Eastern Virginia. Our primary objection to this bill is that it's unnecessary because Virginia has a comprehensive and proven regulatory program governing gas and oil operations in Virginia. This program, along with laudable efforts from the industry, has resulted in a remarkable record of safe and environmentally sensitive production in Virginia. We do recognize and acknowledge that the geology and environment in Eastern Virginia is different than that in Southwest Virginia. And that is precisely why this General Assembly enacted additional restrictions and hurdles for the industry to overcome if they were ever to attempt to produce any natural gas or oil in Eastern Virginia. The code and regulations have substantial additional requirements that apply in Eastern Virginia and do not apply in the rest of the Commonwealth. And these requirements include notice to the public with an opportunity for public comment, notice to local officials with an opportunity for input, an extensive environmental impact assessment that looks at wildlife, aquatic life, water and air quality, land and water resources. Finally, upon the urging of the General Assembly and particularly Senator, your chairman, Senator Stewart, a few years ago, DMME and DEQ entered into a memorandum of agreement that formalized DEQ's role in supervising oil and gas operations in Eastern Virginia if they were ever to occur, and it requires DEQ to have the opportunity to receive comment from the public and other state agencies. They have to ultimately approve the environmental site assessment, and it requires the DMME take their recommendations into account when if they were to impose any conditions on any permits that were sought in Eastern Virginia. Just to clarify, there have been no wells drilled in Eastern Virginia based on the leases that have been described here today. Those leases were put in place between 2010 and 2014, and there have been no permit applications on those.
Ask you a question.
Yes,
There are, Mike's working or not. There are currently no active wells in that region, correct?
correct.
There's some speculation about wells.
Speculation about wells, yes, sir.
There's about 1.5 million people who depend on that aquifer for drinking water, somewhere around there. Is that correct?
I accept that, I don't know.
And all the businesses within that region rely on that, including the entire seafood industry. Is that accurate? Has the
Certainly
oil
rely
and
on
gas
Chesapeake
industry
Bay.
made any sort of, taken any steps, measures? Do you have any idea what those folks in that area could do if that aquifer were contaminated for a different water supply?
Well, I would say, Mr. Chairman, no, because no one in the industry has actually moved in the direction of actually drilling there. As I said, no permit applications have been made. So the industry has.
Well, I guess with regard to the leases, y'all haven't considered that? I mean, what happens if that aquifer is contaminated to the site? You can't clean an aquifer, can you?
I'm not a scientist in that fashion, Mr. Chairman. I do believe that the DMME and DEQ would have the opportunity to have input on how any drilling would take place.
Okay.
And also, for the benefit of the committee, fracking would take place at roughly 5,000 to 10,000 feet below the surface in that area. The aquifer, as I understand it, is 1,000 to 2,000 feet. Scientifically, it's been shown that any fracking fluids that were put into the frac at the lower levels would never work their way up into the aquifer. As I said, we understand and respect the fact that you are drilling through the aquifer.
But that's the concern
in
for the
some of that
folks.
area, and we understand, and we believe that's why why the General Assembly put those additional restrictions in place a number of years ago. I just finally would say that we believe that this is sending the wrong message to the business community, that we would be banning an activity without any evidence that that activity has caused a problem in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Miles Morin with the American Petroleum Institute. 10 years ago, natural gas prices were about $15 per 1,000 cubic feet, and today they are $3.60 per 1,000 cubic feet, and that is a result of this 60-year-old technology, fracking, married with horizontal drilling, which has allowed us to access shale. But is fracking safe? Over 2 million wells have been fracked in the United States, and no fewer than 7 government agencies and several academic institutions have completed reputable studies that show...
I'm sorry, can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I don't dispute that fracking is safe, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. Are we doing it through aquifers that are comparable to the Potomac aquifer?
Yes, sir.
Where is that?
All over the country. We drill through aquifers almost every well that we drill.
Where? I just don't know, so where?
Pennsylvania, in Ohio, in West Virginia, and in Texas.
And they have aquifers comparable
and Louisiana.
to the Potomac?
Louisiana has a ton of wetlands, and they're...
No, I'm not talking about wetlands.
Right.
I'm talking about a giant freshwater lake that stretches from Fairfax to Virginia Beach to Richmond, that's beneath our feet, 3,000 to 7,000 feet under the ground, that's full of drinking water, that kind of an aquifer. Do we... And I don't know, honestly, so do we have folks drilling through things like that successfully?
I can look into it and get back to you about geology elsewhere in the country, but I don't know that right now, but it'd be pretty easy for me to find out.
I don't think we do,
okay.
In all honesty.
Okay. Oh, well, I'll just finish by saying that a Duke University study funded by the Natural Resource Defense Council found that fracturing is not contaminating groundwater in West Virginia. And we have not had any instances in Virginia of contamination of groundwater, permanent degradation from fracking after nearly 10,000 wells fracked. So I hope you'll oppose the bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Evan.
Could I ask a question?
Help yourself,
gentlemen?
Senator Evan.
Sure. Well, first off, you've made a reference to Pennsylvania fracking there. And I know that between 2007 and I guess 2010 or 12, there were at least 2,800 water-related complaints that have been investigated by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection's oil and gas program, and that people complained about the smell of the water, yellow tint, those sorts of things. Do you think any of those complaints, those 2,800 complaints, were valid, or?
I have no way to know. I
Okay.
can tell you that the studies, the extensive studies that have been done in multiple different universities and agencies have found, what I said they found is that there's no extensive link between the two. But I can't, I'm not in Pennsylvania, I can't tell you.
Okay, just because you had referenced it, but thank you for answering the question.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Keith Martin with Virginia Chamber of Commerce. As you and the members of the committee know, affordable, reliable energy is important to our economic competitiveness. We see natural gas as a good bridge to help us meet our energy needs in the future. It also helps us reduce the amount of carbon that we release. So for those reasons, we hope we don't limit our ability to use our own natural resources. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask him a question?
Yes.
Sir, does Virginia Chamber of Commerce support natural gas exploration in the Eastern Virginia groundwater management area?
We have no position on where it's used or how. We want it to be done environmentally safe. We have our Blueprint 2025, as you have probably seen, and we have a big chapter on environmental safety and usage, and environmental component of this is also very important to us.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Chris Nolan
sir.
with McGuire Woods on behalf of CNX Resources, formerly known as Consol Energy. We're a natural gas producer in Southwest Virginia. We also operate in other states, but our Virginia presence is located in far Southwest Virginia, and we also oppose the bill.
Thank you. And Mr. Nolan, I can assure you this has no impact on Southwest Virginia.
Mr. Chairman, I understand that completely, but I think you know that bills like this have a tendency to grow over time, if not within the same session. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? All right, if not, Senator Surovell, do you want to wind up?
The only thing I would say is, I forget which of the folks opposed said it, but somebody said we shouldn't act unless we see there's evidence of a problem with fracking in Virginia. And I would submit to the committee that if we wait until there's a spill in the aquifer, that's too late, because then the aquifer is ruined. So we followed that approach with a few other things. For example, coal ash. Now we have a multi-billion-dollar problem on our hands. I think it's better to act ahead of time and be safe, especially when we've got the drinking water for 1.5 million people involved, including, by the way, my house. Well, I'm in the only private water system in Fairfax County, and 110 people have been using that well for almost 80 years now. And there's a lot of people from Fairfax all the way down that depend on that for water.
All right. Senator Peterson?
Yeah, I've listened to both sides, and I appreciate both sides, because I know just enough on this issue to be dangerous, and I appreciate the comments of the environmental community. I appreciate what Senator Surovell has done. I don't like the idea of just an outright prohibition with, frankly, modest evidence at this point on the points, but I understand the concerns. I think a moratorium might be a better way to go at this point. So what I would do is I would move to amend his bill to change it from an outright prohibition to being a 4-year moratorium, if I could get a second on that.
Is there a second on that? I think I heard a second. We heard a second. Okay, there's a motion properly seconded to reform this to a moratorium for 4 years. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. We got one no. Ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman.
Can you do that language now, Chad? Report it to us.
It would just take an enactment clause on the end of it.
Yeah, so
I know you're a good lawyer, but let's let Chad do it.
Provisions of this act shall expire July 1, 2022.
Mr. Chairman, on line 17, there would be a new enactment clause that says, 2, that the provisions of this act shall expire on June 30th, 2023, I believe. Is that right?
22.
22.
It's 4 years, it's 2.
4 years.
22. Okay.
And Mr. Chair, with that amendment being reported and agreed to, I'd move to pass the bill as amended.
Okay. Is there a second motion?
I have a substitute motion, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Chafin.
I move to report the bill and the bill be re-referred to finance.
Second.
Well, Let me ask staff, did we get a request from finance for this? No. We got the chairman right here.
Mr. Chairman, as staff reviews me, that they had not told me it had been suggested to me that there would be potential impact. I'm not sure that there would be impact to the state budget, however, but it depends on what the committee does. I mean, we can look at it up there, but that's, we're not requesting it.
Okay.
Chairman, I've made my motion, my substitute motion. It's been properly seconded.
All right, there's a substitute motion properly seconded.
And I would like to comment on it.
To report and re-refer to Senate Finance.
Yes.
Is there any discussion?
If you'd allow me to comment on that.
Senator Chafin?
I mean, I think it's, I mean, with all due respect to everyone who's grappling with this issue, it's reckless of this committee to embark on something like this, a moratorium or a prohibition, when this bill would, I believe, result in a legal taking of gas rights that'll subject the Commonwealth to claims. And I believe, I mean, I think this is one of those things, like we've heard about bills, you don't know what's in it and you won't know what happens until you pass it. But if you want to pass this thing and you want to find out how many people are going to sue the Commonwealth and whether or not they're going to be able to get their case through federal court or through state court, you know, I can think of several hundreds of millions of dollars of reasons that might subject this Commonwealth to a tremendous debt to these individuals. So, I mean, the only way to extract this gas is by fracking. You heard it. And if you put a moratorium on it, or if you put an outright ban on it, there will be potentially a budget impact that should be considered by finance. Because it was very telling when Senator Surovell, when it was suggested by his law partner that he
Former law partner.
Okay, that he whether or not he would agree to an amendment that would have protected the rights of those individuals who lease those lands. He didn't want to agree to that, okay, because he knows the issue here with regard to liability to the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I say these comments in support of my motion to re-refer this matter.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Black, is this discussion on the motion?
It is a discussion on this on the substitute motion.
There's a motion to report and re-refer Senate
Yes.
Finance. It's appropriate for discussion
Yes.
on that motion.
And I agree with the motion to send to finance. There's been generations of fracking taking place in Southwest with virtually almost no problems whatsoever. When you frack, you drill through with casings and you go down through the aquifer, and it's not just stuff blowing through, but there is a casing that is put down that goes through there that's sealed, and nothing comes out of it within the aquifer, and then it goes much farther deep, much more deeply, and that's where the oil comes from. We've got 2 million of these wells in the country operating successfully, not causing any problems. And we are beginning to export liquefied natural gas, and within the next 5 years or so, it will be just the 6 trains of liquefied natural gas are going to reduce the national trade deficit $50 billion per year. So I just think it's a big mistake for the nation and for the Commonwealth to cut off our access to this, particularly where we have a very, very safe process in place.
Mr. Chairman, can I say something, or am I not on the committee? I don't get to talk.
We probably ought to. Let's hear the motion. The substitute motion is to report the bill and re-refer to Senate Finance. Clerk, open the roll.
5 ayes, 9 nays.
The motion fails to report. So the primary
Primary
motion
motion.
was to report the bill.
As
Clerk-
amended.
As amended. Clerk, please open the roll.
9 ayes, 5 nays, 1 abstention.
The bill reports. Thank you, Senator Surovell.
Thank you.